Oh boy. I get to finally talk about one of my all-time favorite pieces of my collection. This is the RPK, specifically the $430 LCT RPK. And I think this is honestly the best RPK. Even though I think the RPK kinda breaks balancing when it comes to the LMG or supportive role. You see, whenever the M27 IAR or the L86 LSW or even the Shrike isn't allowed to use full auto for some reason at your local events, the RPK is definitely allowed to. Maybe it's because of the longer barrel or because it's slightly heavier. Honestly, it doesn't matter. I've used other replicas of this, and I've actually used my LCT for over 3 years now. So I think I'm now qualified to make the review that I've always wanted to. But this is not going to be a perfect review by any means. There's a lot that could be a whole lot better when it comes to this. So let's go ahead and show off the externals and the internals, see how it performs, and go over every single pro and con that I can find throughout this thing. Thanks to LCT, who is sponsoring this review. They're letting me say anything I want to about this thing, so I'm definitely going to speak my mind. But go ahead and check out the description down below to send you off to evic.com if you're ready to go ahead and pick up one of these. But with that said, let's go ahead and start off this review where we always do, with the unboxing. Alright, sliding over the decal glazed cardboard box, it's nothing out of the ordinary. This continues as you open it up with the paperwork on top of a cardboard sheet and all the goodies underneath that. The paperwork is what you would assume. A little catalog with some other LCT products and a bit of information here and there. But this is a rather basic AK, so keep this paperwork if you want to, but you really don't need it. Moving on, LCT doesn't really care too much about the presentation. And that's totally fine as long as the contents are unscathed. You get what you ordered in a plastic tray, and that's pretty much it. Besides the metal dog tag, that's fitting for what you ordered. Out of the box first impressions were good back then, and they're still good now. It's hard to hate on a full steel replica that feels this well put together, with a good looking set of wood furniture. It feels like a $400 replica. It feels like you can drive home a few nails with the backside of the stock if you don't feel like using the steel-bodied 130 round mid-cap magazine. I spent my own money on this RPK, and I wasn't disappointed by any means when I got it out of the box. If you've ever handled one of LCT's beautiful AKMs, then you know what I'm talking about. The size difference is still apparent, however the weight, I think, isn't too much of a problem. However, most people I lend it to immediately comment about it. And I'm talking about 20 to 40-year-old players that normally play with 6 to 8 pound rifles who tell me that the RPK is just a little heavy. Besides being a little longer and a little bit heavier, the RPK and just about all of its variants, like the RPK 74, aren't much of a hassle to work with. And if you have an RPK 16, then forget about it. That thing is a pocket LMG that might confuse a lot of refs over its legitimacy as an LMG. Anyway, starting at the end of the barrel, we have an all-steel setup from the front sight post that's adjustable for windage and elevation to the muzzle brake / thread protector. As you can see, it comes painted in orange as you'd expect for the US, but I just drew over mine with a bit of black Sharpie. Moving back to the handguard for a second, it's that classic look that you would expect made from some really nice chunks of laminate wood. It's not cheap to the eyes or when you feel it. It's smooth and not horrendously orange. If you want to stick to the classic look of the original RPK, then these are solid, but real grips I've heard will go right on. The stamped steel bipod is where some of the extra weight can be found. This is a really basic bipod with no adjustments. You flip the catch and throw it down. That's it. It has a bit of swivel, but not too much, so if you want to use anything longer than a standard 30 round style magazine, then maybe you should think about something else, because it will topple over. Regardless, a monkey could use this bipod. I don't see mine ever falling apart anytime soon, even if I bang it against barriers. It's simple but solid. But I'll probably slice my fingers a few more times on the edges of the steel. That's a part of the LCT experience, you can say. Under the barrel and through the bipod, you'll find a standard size cleaning rod, which is incorrect for the longer RPK barrel. So that might annoy some people out there like me. Of course, you should never use this on your airsoft inner barrels, but it's here, I guess. All in all, the whole front end is really tight and well built. Like I've said, I've been using mine for over 3 years, and I've never needed to tighten anything. On the contrary, I needed a mallet to get the gas tube switch to swing upward so I could then disassemble the entire gun and get the gearbox out of the body, but more on this later. The steel sling points are solid, by the way, both on the Handguard retainer and on the iconic clubbed wood stock. But one thing I've never liked about this LCT has to be the battery connection placement. Having to use tools to connect a battery is a big pet peeve of mine, but if it doesn't bother you, then as long as you have a flathead screwdriver, then you should be able to get into here. Just be aware that these flat steel portions that hold onto the screws can come out. This happened to me at my home field at Mission Airsoft, and I never found it. And if you lose both of them, then duct tape will be the only thing holding onto your butt plate. So in retrospect, you could lose the screws, the flat steel inserts for those screws, and the cleaning kit door. You really need to keep an eye on all this stuff since the connections are in here, unlike if they were under the dust cover. I mean, really, how daft do you have to be to lose this thing? Anyway, the cleaning kit trap door is a nice addition. I've seen other RPKs just mold this into the butt plate, and you don't really need to have it on if you really don't want to. You can just leave it off and screw back on the butt plate and you can go about your day. We don't have any MOSFETs or Dean's connections in here though. Not even a fuse of any kind, which was a little concerning as I know a lot of owners love using these things with really high voltage batteries. These are truly a part of LCT's classic line of AEGs, and that means you get basic electronics throughout. The stock space is good for most 7.4 LiPo users though. Even some older fat batteries from Airsoft's past should be able to fit in here. I remember they were even making and selling custom fitted batteries for RPK stocks. But last up, I'm gonna quickly go over the receiver and controls because every child soldier knows how to use this. I would like you to note the receiver reinforcements near the chamber and bolt and even along the outer barrel. And don't forget about the very special and unique serial number under the receiver in front of the magwell. Realistically, the real important parts to make note of is that you have 0 mounting points for any sights with the original RPK. So if you want the side mount like you would find on an AK-74 or the AKS-74U, then try to get an RPK-74 or 16. You can even get an RPK-S-74, so you can get a folding stock. But behind the mock bolt, as you would assume, would be the much older slider hop-up adjuster that is notorious for becoming loose with time. But fixing this is really easy. Just tighten the screw that holds it in place and you're done. Under the dust cover is where I would have liked to see the battery connections like a lot of other AKs have done, because there's definitely enough room under here for such a conversion. So if you're handy, then maybe this will give you an idea. And for those who fight back and forth if a certain AK should have a smooth or a ribbed dust cover, just know that I was able to swap the stock one with other LCT and ENL dust covers with a bit of patience. But Zach Schaefer, who builds a lot of stuff for Brandon Herrera, said that original RPKs had smooth dust covers. So, na. Besides that, the fire selector is nice and tight and works like any other AK. The rear sight is adjustable for elevation and in conjunction with the front sight are clean enough to use. But some people might see that this rear sight is completely wrong for this replica. This is a regular AK style of sight. We're missing the windage adjustment that every Russian RPK should have. I feel that LCT cut a couple corners here and there to save some money. Hardly anyone notices this, but as an RPK fanboy, I for sure saw it when I pulled it out of the box. So I do look forward to replacing this rear sight with a real one in the future. But moving along, I've used just about every common AK magazine with this LCT with success. I've used SEMA drum magazines and standard mags,
Mag brand mags, GMP, Arcturus, ENL, and more. Granted, I think that ENL mags kinda suck in the feeding department, but when they feed, they do the job. But still, ENL, you really need to fix your magazines. LCT mid-caps aren't much better, by the way. I really have no idea as to why either companies think that squared flat followers are a good idea, but I promise you, no one will be complaining if you guys start using extended followers. LCT drum mags though, probably the best on the market. I'm just gonna say it.
Okay, so we have a fully loaded 2,000 round steel drum mag. I can hear it clicking. I'm set to full auto. This is with a 7.4 LiPo battery, so I'm expecting that low rate of fire. But first wound on this magazine, let's see what we can do. Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that these drum magazines are some of the very best they can get. I don't want to be seen as over-exaggerative, but whenever I tell people just how much I can shoot with this on a single wound, they're usually thoroughly impressed.
The amount of BBs going through my RPK with a 7.4 LiPo with a single whine is stellar. You can tell me in the comments if I'm over-exaggerating here, but my SEMA drums can't compete in this regard. They did fit in a lot more brands of AKs though. But go figure, the LCT drums feed like a dream in an LCT. Standard LCT magazines tend to be more reliable for me across most AKs as compared to ENLs that I've used, but not by much. I love the look of these magazines, but they need an overhaul regarding the springs and follower. I don't know, man, LCT and ENL magazines just tend to suck for me. But now we have the internals to look at, and I would definitely recommend that you check out some of the disassembly videos if you need some advice to get to this point. I don't want to steal their thunder or get hit with some kind of ridiculous guideline violations by showing you a full breakdown here, so consider this my cheap way out. Call me greedy, but I just don't like having all my videos demonetized for the most stupid of reasons. Just know that you'll have to remove the entire outer barrel from the receiver, so you'll be doing a lot before even getting into the gearbox. Thank God a bunch of AK manufacturers saw this, realized it was a huge pain in the ass, and made gearbox removal so much easier as time went on. But anyway, getting the non-crown 610mm brass 6.02mm inner barrel and plastic hop-up set out, I'll say that I'm impressed that this barrel is still really clean despite being used for 3 years with biodegradable BBs. But the nub is just out of date in my opinion. It's just a flat-faced nub that goes straight across the barrel, which would make sense for the accuracy that I've had. And I'm also happy to see that LCT used nearly every bit of the RPK's long barrel. I mean, this inner barrel is huge. Moving on, of course the gearbox shell doesn't feature a quick access to the spring, but everything from the motor connections to every screw is tight on my 3-year-old model. Even each gearbox screw holding the shell together was thread locked from the factory, which was a big surprise. With the shell split open now, we saw a steel ball bearing spring guide with a non-linear spring this time, which mates to a piston with no bearing inside. For the compression set, this LCT has an aluminum piston head with a full rack of steel teeth, and even after 3 years of moderate to heavy use, it's looking pretty good. The ribbed, non-ported cylinder was made from stainless steel, and the cylinder head was tightly fitted, and it came with dual O-rings. Then the poly air nozzle had an O-ring inside, but again, it wasn't anything special. This made for standard air seal, nothing really to write home about, like the aluminum sector delay chip and 9mm ball bearings jammed into the shell. All in all, Connor, my very helpful USAirsoft tech, said, "This gearbox is passable. The shimming was basic, It could be a lot better in comparison to what tech's like now, but all the O-rings were good despite the use. Connor's personal suggestions to me were to swap to XT60 connections to make use of the wide size of the stock cavity, that I should use a 5000 mAh 7.4 LiPo battery for an RC car for how thin but wide they can be, and that I would just need an automotive fuse and maybe some thicker gauge wires and a basic MOSFET if I'd like. But if you ever plan to go past the 7.4 LiPo battery, you might not even need a basic MOSFET, but it never hurts. You do not need a $200 gate MOSFET, and you probably don't need weird burst fire modes or binary fire. I just want something that'll let me use an 11.1 LiPo battery without damaging the trigger contacts if I ever wanted a much higher rate of fire. And with that, I threw all of this back together and headed to the chronograph with the 7.4 LiPo and some 0.2 gram BBs, which yielded us 415 to 421 feet per second. So this of course is a field gun, obviously. Rate of fire is pretty low even for something like this at just under 12 rounds per second. That's usable for long durations of supportive fire though. Connect a dreaded 11.1 LiPo battery and things really go way up. But again, this doesn't have a MOSFET or fuse, so be careful if you ever use an 11.1 LiPo with something like an LCT AK. So this RPK goes from just enough to be annoying on the field if you're heavy on the trigger, to you'll have everyone terrified that you're going to drill someone with a heavy rate of fire at over 400 feet per second. So, all in all, not bad. At the range, I am happy to say that 200 feet will not be a problem at all, even with 0.28 gram BBs. 250 feet isn't as easy though. Both my brand new RPK and 3-year-old model fire in a circular pattern, I notice. But with a full hop up and barrel upgrade, you'll be golden. It's more than good enough though. This isn't supposed to be a sniper rifle, and if I was blasting 20 or 30 rounds at a time, everyone out in the open at 250 feet is going down easily. This is kind of an old school replica on terms of technology and performance, but it just does the job. So with that, let me go ahead and bring in the Scott Score rating system, which may be heavily influenced by a certain automotive influencer. This performance is great, but not mind-blowing. It'll get the job done, and very easily. But these old school LCTs could be so much better with even a basic MOSFET, and I'd swap out the old slider hop-up with a good rotary unit. There are several things that could be a lot better here, which all start to mount up. So despite being legendary in performance maybe 6 or 8 years ago, I have to give it a 6 out of 10. The drum mags are still amazing though. I'll praise LCT drum magazines all day. I just wish they fit in more brands of AKs. Everyday play, on the other hand, is going to be pretty good as it's a part of the second most used platform in the game of Airsoft. Anyone can figure out how an AK like this one works. The RPK is just big AK. You can find magazines pretty much anywhere for this thing, and this LCT is very accepting of any parts. The range and rate of fire, even with the 7.4 LiPo, will be annoying to go up against if you're heavy on the trigger. Combo that with a lot of magazines or a couple 2,000 round drum mags, and people will grow to hate you on the field. This is a platform I tend to take it easy with when I'm granted full auto function at my home field, because it's lightweight to me, reloads are quick and easy, and I can hand it off to a younger beginner and he'll rock the house just like I was. The only thing really holding back the classic RPK is a lack of customization right from the box. But you don't get the basic model to complain about the lack of rails, just like how you don't get a Corvette, then complain you don't have a truck bed to haul a couch. The length is also going to hold the RPK back. You can't ignore it, especially if you have to take cover behind small barriers or if gun hits count. So I think a 7 out of 10 is more than fitting. Collector value, for those who care, is also really good for the classic LCT RPK, even with the inaccurate cleaning rod and rear sight. This is thanks to just being an RPK, and because it has wood furniture and an all-steel construction. The RPK just draws a lot of attention. People love seeing this thing. And I get more interest when people find out that it's an LCT and not an old JG or an SRC or a SEMA. The limited edition GHK gas blowback model will always be more popular with collectors, however. But at the end of the day, these aren't very rare, as you can get one anytime you have $400. So I will give it a 6 out of 10. Build quality continues the upward trend for the amazing steel body. These LCTs can be used as hammers. Very few parts, if any, on the outside feel cheap. I've said this before in several previous reviews, but you could throw this thing through a car window and it would be fine. The magazines could use an overhaul on the inside, and Dean's connections are a great way to get bonus points from the majority of the community nowadays. So maybe LCT will release a new gen model to bring their older AKs up to speed. As is right now though, I'll give the LCT RPK a 7 out of 10. So if we have a solid replica on the outside and it can dish out full auto reliably at over 250 feet for 25 seconds with a drum magazine, then how can the worthiness be brought down? Well, the community has complained for years that LCT has been lacking with their stock gearboxes, especially with their motors. They are very easy to replace parts in, and a lot of parts inside will do just fine for years, but it could be so much better. And again, the size and extra weight is notorious. Everyone at my field tells me about how the weight of this thing is a problem. Regardless, the RPK is still allowed full auto at most fields where other LSWs are restricted to semi. So we have quick reloads, acceptance of most version 3 parts, and the seemingly unbalanced nature of something like an RPK compared to the closest competitor, the M249. And I might catch some flack for this, but the M249 just always seems to have some kind of feeding issue. But with all that in mind, I'll give the $430 LCT RPK a worthiness rating of 8 out of 10. Add the numbers together, and we get a 34 out of 50. With a good internal update, LCT could really make these awesome replicas so much better, so I hope to see something in the future come out of this. Now, I know I hardly ever get called out for being some kind of shill, but I can see some people thinking that this review feels a little disingenuous. I have been rather positive, and this is technically sponsored by LCT. That's not a good sign to some people, and that is totally fair to believe in that. But I will be 100% honest with you. LCT asked me what I wanted to make a video out of from their catalog, and I immediately picked the RPD, but that was out of stock. So I naturally went with one of my favorite LCTs of all time, which I hadn't made a real video about. I knew that my RPK would make for a fun and good review. And shocker, I make videos over stuff that I like. But like always, I'm very open to any questions, discussions, or anything else in the comments. And I hold the right to say anything I want to say about any part of a replica. I do not cut out anything out of these reviews. I'm always open to any criticisms you might have. I will not shut you down if you're being reasonable in debate. And the community has taught me the majority of what I know. I'll continue to host an open door to any questions you might have. Furthermore, I stress that you go watch any other review or discussion so you can get even more information. It's always best to do your own research, because you'll find more pros, more cons, and you might even be able to compare quality control. And I invite any current or previous owners to sound off about their LCT experiences in the comments down below.
And with that said, I hope you enjoyed this review over one of my all-time favorite pieces in my collection. I still see no point in upgrading anything here unless I strip the piston or the motor goes out. But even then, I just might throw a Polar Star in one of these because I think the RPK might be one of the best things to turn into an HPA base. And obviously, I don't even need 2 RPKs, so expect this one to be given away soon. Keep an eye out for that. A big thank you goes out to everyone at my home field of Mission Airsoft in San Antonio, Texas for putting up with me being a little devious on the field to get the gameplay clips that I needed for this review. And a thank you goes out to LCT and EVIC for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the description for all the links you might need to get one of these yourself or any other gear at evic.com. Of course, in the comments down below, let me know what you thought about this LCT RPK and if it should be considered legendary. But until our next video drops from the city of San Antonio, Texas, this has been Scott Hollenbeck, and I will be sure to see you all next time.
Okay, so after a game with that, what do you think? You're normally used to really lightweight, small guns, so how's this?
This is about 10, maybe 15 pounds heavier than what I'm used to. Even without my kit, it's a workout and a half. So props to you, Scott. But I mean, what's this weigh? 15, 20 pounds?
I honestly can't remember.
It's heavy. I mean, my whole kit probably weighs as much as this gun. So
I was seeing you struggle with the length of the barrel.
Yeah, my guns are usually about that big. So that is definitely a change. Once I got used to it, I started popping out some nice shots.
Now, on the field today, we had an M249 that was having all sorts of magazine problems, I think. So, how did this feed?
There was not a single misfire. I actually overwhelmed the mag once because I thought I hadn't shot enough. I'd shot too much. And the magazine winds right here. It's electric, which is nice because you don't have to sit there and make noise. But no misfires, no double feeds. Every shot fed just fine. Just takes getting used to.
So, I saw that you were running an EBB AK a little bit earlier. What do you think about this LCT RPK? Because you're interested in one, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I actually love it. It's very nice, heavy, but badass, I ain't gonna lie. It's like, yeah, I would recommend if you're trying to run any kit. But yeah.
And whenever you're done with your day, but you still have a lot of rounds in your drum magazine, it's super easy. Pop off the lid, and this is all that I have left after that burn that we just did. There's still a lot in here, so I'm just gonna go over here, and there we go. There might be some stragglers, but whatever. Then I go over to the box. This takes AA batteries. Go ahead and switch it off, and now it won't wind up anymore. You're good to go home.